Hi there folks, I hope you're well, and this is the video that I promised you. I said in my last post that I was going to deliver a video, and it was going to be another one of my Indiana Jones-esque adventures to find the origins or the site of a particular variety, to which I was partway through filming when something cropped up that meant I will do it on another time. So I can't let you down. So what do? I'm going to come to my village of Dimocuum. Yes, the mighty Dimocuum in northwest Gloucestershire. This is the village that I grew up in. I grew up just down the road over there, and I'm here on the village green. That is St Mary's Church behind me. Its origins are Norman. This is an old village. It's got a Roman heritage. There are lots of Roman works done here, and the first of many that I'm about to tell you about, links to cider and perry, actually occurred at the old school, which is just down the road there. There was an excavation in 1959 done and found what was described as a lug. A lug is like an iron hook to go on the end of a pole for panking. Were the Romans panking here in the 3rd or 4th century? Don't know. I'm looking for the lug as it happens right now in the archives somewhere. I'll let you know how I get on. Certainly Dimocuum and cider and perry have a relationship and a history going back at least sort of 500 years. Somebody else, thankfully, has done an incredible sort of compilation of all the historical records of where Dimocuum and cider and apples and perry and pears are kind of mentioned, and it seems to be that there's a mention in the of an apple press in a will going back to the 1550s. So there's at least 500 years worth of cider heritage here, and then you go through and there's lots of mention. Probably the key and the critical place is actually just on the edge of the village, and it's called the Grange, or the Old Grange, and it was part of Flaxley Abbey down on the banks of the River Severn, and it was a sort of the minor manor house of the village. And certainly in Evelyn's Pomona, the first real kind of cider book, it's talked about the Old Grange and its proprietor, Master Wynyard, a very good host by all accounts, of producing this amazing cider from Red Streak apples, Herefordshire Red Streak apples from Home Lacey, just over the border. And if you go to 1703 in Abel Wantoner's History of Gloucestershire, he talks about the same, presumably Master Wynyard, or maybe his son, once again being a fine host and making this fine and rare Vinum Dimocuum. Dimocuum wine made of apples. Come on, amazing. And apparently he had so many trees that if you took one apple from every tree, it was able to make a hogshead. By my back of a fag packet calculation, it's about 5,000 trees there must have been up there 300 years ago. Dimocuum really was a cider making powerhouse for a long time. It's largely kind of disappeared now. There's not so much of it in the landscape, and that which existed more latterly was sort of linked to Weston's in the village next door of Muchmarkle, and lots of old orchards there still supplying fruit to Weston's, like 50 years ago my granny's farm on the edge of the village, they were also supplying fruit there. But key and critical was the fact that cider from Weston's was being distributed around the country thanks to Dimocuum railway station, which is just around the corner. The line closed in the 1960s, part of Dr. Beeching's great axing of regional railway lines. And so yeah, all the cider from Weston's was distributed through the Dimocuum railway line, which was known as the Daffodil Line. Apart from cider and perry, Dimocuum is famous for a couple of things. First of all, wild daffodils. Narcissus, pseudo-narcissus, dinky little things, very pretty, very quaint. They love uncultivated land, so the hedgerows, the woodlands, and the old orchards. And as testimony to there not being so many of those old orchards left, there aren't many of these daffodils left, but they are absolutely magical. The other great link from this village is to a band of poets that gathered here about 1910 up until the First World War in 1914. They're known as the Dimocuum poets, and they were sort of the finest and the preeminent poets of their time. People like Rupert Brooke, John Drinkwater, Lascelles Abercrombie, and Edward Thomas, and probably the most famous of the bunch, not at the time, but went on to be, Robert Frost from the USA. He spent a year here living on the edge of the village, and he's probably most famous for speaking at JFK's inauguration. Inauguration. I keep on saying inauguration, and I know that's not right because I was listening to the inauguration the other day. Why can't I say that word? He wrote the poem "The Road Not Taken," and it starts with "Two roads diverge in a yellow wood." Now, he wrote this when he'd moved back to New England, and people thought he was talking about his local woodlands. Guess where those yellow woods were? Right here in Dimocuum. Of course they were. Those daffodils once again. And it's often taken as a signifier of choose the lesser trodden path and be brave. And it is that. But he was also writing about his good mate Edward Thomas that he would go on these walks with. And he was a real ditherer. And I kind of, if I go that way, there's the really cool oak tree. But if I go that way, maybe I might see the buzzard or the Perry pear. What do we do? So anyway, I love the fact apparently that poem is taught to all 7th graders in the USA. I love the fact that Dimmock spreads all around the world. Now, back to cider and perry, of course. Dimmock is probably the only village in the world, I'm going to claim it, somebody tell me if you know of another place that has an eponymous apple, pear and plum. There is a Dimmock red apple, Dimmock red pear, Dimmock red plum. The Dimmock red apple is an old one. It's been written about in the 1700s. Is it possibly? There's a theory that it might be a child of the Herefordshire Red Streak, possibly. It might have originated up at the Old Grange. There's no great historical evidence to confirm. There's no smoking gun just yet. We'll have to find out. The Dimmock red pear, a very rare one actually, and was thought lost, but Charles Martel, that amazing cheesemaker, Stinking Bishop, anybody? He was also the person who really helped to rescue all these Perry pear varieties, and he's situated on the edge of Dimmock here as well. And he's the one who found the Dimmock red pear once again. There was one old tree that he managed to find, and he's taken cuttings, and the variety has been saved in perpetuity, obviously. It's also known by the synonym Billy Thurston, and it seems to be the case that William Thurston lived right here. This property behind me, which you can't really see because the sun's too glaring, that is the White House. And by all accounts, that's where it's thought to have originated. And Charles Martel actually planted a pear tree there. Now, apparently it's died, which is unfortunate. But there we go. The Dimmock red plum is a bit of a rare variety. It's good for making jam. Apparently the flesh sticks to the stone somewhat, but this is the whole reason why I got interested in cider and perry, is because of this place, this link, these stories. It's everything that interests me so much. And on my granny's farm, which is no longer in the family, but is on the edge of the village, there's one Perry pear tree left, an old thorn tree, and it was making that drink that got me sort of like, yeah, I kind of like this stuff. And so thanks to that. So yeah, there we go. It's not exactly the adventure that we were after. I'm going to come back to it, don't worry. But I thought I'd give you a little bit of insight to this amazing village of Dimmock in Gloucestershire. If anybody wants to go and visit, go in March. That's when the daffodils come out. And the great pub here, let me show you. The pub here is called the Beecham Arms. It's run by a wonderful guy called Matt Hill. He's a proud Dimmock boy, multiple generations here. And it's a community pub, so it's actually owned by the village. It was the very first community pub in the UK, 1994. And here we go. The Beecham Arms. And there's daffodil weekends that are sort of done here. You do walks from the church and from the pub, and you have to go out into the fields and see all the wonderful landscape and all the historical aspects. It's very much worth it. There we go. If you've got any suggestions about videos or content that you might want to have, let me know. I'm going to try and be a little bit more proactive on here. But for now, what's out?